The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Brenden. Brenden, if you could tell me when and where you were born, and if you could describe to me what it was like, where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. All yours.
Absolutely, Tim. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So my parents immigrated from Sri Lanka in the early 90s, which is a small country south of India. But I was born in 96, so in the mid 90s, in Montreal, Canada. That's where I was born and raised. And for those who don't know, Montreal is a city, Tim, where you need to know how to speak French. Except I didn't know the language. So my whole life, I actually studied in a French education system. And every time I presented, it was mostly to a language I didn't really know. So when I was 6 or 7 years old, you would see me in front of a classroom and I'd go, bonjour. And that was my life growing up as a kid. Another piece that was key is I have a crooked left arm. And the reason is because I had a surgery when I was younger. So I had a big cast on when I was in kindergarten and first grade. And it was hard for me to make friends. It was already hard because I didn't know the language. And then on top of that, I had to walk around like this, which is kind of weird. So that was most of my childhood growing up.
So with a cast on, I mean, you obviously bonjour, monsieur, ça va, avez-vous, a pen so you can sign my cast. That could have been a way forward.
Yeah, that definitely could have been one of the strategies. Obviously, now I'm a lot better at French, but back then, I think the only reason I didn't get bullied as much, Tim, and I think I just got lucky, it's because I'm Canadian. You know, if I was born in the U.S., it probably would have been a different story. But I think because I was born in Canada, all the kids were really nice to me.
Yeah. So you're born in the French side of Canada then?
That's correct. So how Canada works is there's one province where French is an official language. So provinces like state in the US.
Yeah.
And then what happens is every other province in Canada, the official language is English, except for Quebec. So how Quebec works, where Montreal is a city in, you actually need to learn French, or else you can't really get a great job out of the city.
I mean, I guess you can get by because like English is spoken in the rest of the country, and I guess the French speakers have to learn to speak English anyway. So
That's correct. But English is way easier than French, Tim. Like French is super,
yeah.
super hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So
they
that's
talk,
why I'm glad I learned it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, they talk backwards, don't they?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, my French is pretty lousy at the best of times, but I used to do a really good trick. I did a bit of lorry driving for a time, and I used to go to into France, and I used to go to this particular factory, and I always saw this charge hand coming across the yard, and I was loading for Norway, and I used to shout across the yard as loud as I could so everybody could hear. I shout, bonjour, monsieur, ça va? Avez-vous chargé pour moi, pour Norvège, s'il vous plaît? And he's walking across the yard with his hands over his ears and please, please, I speak English. Works every time.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah. But, I mean, I learned to speak a little bit of French. So they sort of warmed you a little bit. So, kindergarten again, you've got this big cast on. How did you break your arm? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, so the story, Tim, was I actually broke my arm at birth. So what happened was I was born upside down. So normally what happens, as per my knowledge, though I'm not a doctor, the best way to actually take the baby out is to cut the stomach open, but it risks the life of the mom. So instead, what they do is they use a vacuum to pull you out. And it only happens like 1 in 1,000 times where a mistake is made in that extraction process. And usually, some people it's a lot worse, but me, I got really lucky. It was just my left arm that got dislocated upon arrival. So
Mm.
I've always been like this. Except I only got operated in a serious way probably when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
All right. I mean, dislocating shoulders is not a lot of fun at the best of times. Having done it a couple of times myself, yeah, it's generally quite painful, and takes a bit of effort to knock it back in. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so you didn't get the other kids to sign your cast or anything then to sort of make friends.
There you go.
It's just one of those openers. So I guess that they took a little bit of pity on it. How quick? I mean, obviously being young, you'd have picked up speaking French fairly quickly.
Yeah, great question. It was around grade two. So obviously, when you learn a language young, you can still figure it out relatively quickly. So I'd say, but let me make sure the facts are clear too. Even if I could speak fluently as of grade two, I was still failing in French practically most of my life. I was actually so bad at it that I had to be put in a special needs program for French. And I only learned it perfectly. I mean, perfectly is a strong word for French. Even native speakers don't know how to speak it well. But it was probably being by grade eight, I was pretty good. Like I knew how to write pretty well with very few mistakes. But in terms of speaking it fluently, probably grade two.
Hmm. So then you started making friends, obviously, being able to communicate with them.
You know what the secret was, Tim? The secret was there was a small community in the French school who spoke English, so that's who I made friends with.
So what was your native language then?
Yeah, so I'm fluent in English and French, and the third language that I'm fluent in is called Tamil, which is my mom's mother tongue in Sri Lanka, and it's also spoken
Yeah,
in India and Singapore.
yeah. So I guess at home you're speaking Tamil. You
That's
had to
correct, with
learn
my mom specifically.
English and French at school.
You got it.
Oh,
So
that's good enough.
actually, I was speaking with my mom in English until I was maybe 10 years old because my mom never wanted me to get her accent in her
Mm,
Indian accent, her Sri Lankan accent in her case. So what happened was I actually learned Tamil through watching movies. So I would watch all these Bollywood movies because my mom was is not comfortable in English or French. So I gave
mm.
it like a personal responsibility to figure out how to speak Tamil so I could talk to her in a language that she would perfectly understand. And that's how I learned Tamil later in life.
Ah, ah. So moving on then, your experience in sort of kindergarten was fairly steep learning curve, I guess, trying to learn English and Tamil. Well, speaking Tamil at home, but um, but picking up French along the way. Um, when did you move up to what's the next one up from kindergarten? Is it sort of like junior school? You have a
Elementary, we
distance
call it ele.
elementary school. So uh, by the time you got to elementary school, you were obviously speaking fairly well.
Um, so I was fluent, but I was still really scared of speaking in front of a classroom because remember, like French is my second language, right? As I'm giving these presentations, just in general, like I don't have all the words together, and I struggled with that until like the end of high school, probably until like
Mm.
grade 12, which is a year before college started. So I actually never really got over it. The way I got over it was by switching to an English curriculum because how the education system works, Tim, in Montreal, is if you come from a family of immigrants, you actually have to go to a French school. You don't really have a choice,
Mm.
which is a good thing for me because I learned the language, but only up until high school. So then after high school, you can go to college in English, and that's what I did.
No. Ah. So that's how it works. So during your middle school days, then what were what was the sort of the normal sort of curriculum that you did? So you're obviously doing French, you're doing English, I guess, and then all sort of core studies that sort of English, maths, and sciences, and etc. What other classes did you do that you really enjoyed?
Oh, really enjoyed. Okay, that's definitely a different one. So what I didn't enjoy was sciences. I was really bad at sciences, and I don't know why I took physics and chemistry. I could have saved myself the trouble. That's one. The other piece I would say was mathematics. I've always loved math, really good at it. That's why I actually wanted to be an accountant initially. A lot of people when they're
Oh,
12 years old, Tim, they want to be stand-up comedians or astronauts. Yeah, I wanted to be an accountant, which is really bizarre, even if I didn't know what it was.
terrific. So,
Yeah, so
did you ever
that was my
manage to
life.
be an accountant?
I did actually. Yeah, yeah,
Well, we'll
yeah.
come on
So
to
I
that in a
actually
bit
never
then.
changed. Go ahead.
So we'll come on to that in a bit. So, um, what was your absolute favourite class?
Favorite class? You know, honestly, it was probably English because it was the only class I could talk my first language in. So, and it was fun because I was like, oh, I could be me in this class. Every other class I had to speak French. So up
Hmm.
until high school, I would say, except that my last high school teacher in English was so horrendous. I won't say her name, but terrible, terrible experience. But every other year in English was pretty fun.
Wicked. What was your worst subject? What one didn't you just didn't want to get up in the morning and go to school for?
Definitely French. French, I was horrible at. That changed probably in the last year or two of French because I realized it was my last year ever I had to take this class. So I was
Hmm.
really happy about it. But in general, yeah, French I was really bad at, Tim. Like every
Hmm.
other grade I was decent at. You know, I get 90s in math, 70s, 80s in sciences. But French, oh my god, I'd be lucky if I was in the 50s. I'd be lucky.
I suppose all the local kids leave you standing.
You know, it's funny. Everyone, even the native speakers, Tim, they sucked at French too. Like I was, they were just as bad as I was. They were just a little bit better.
Brilliant. I don't know why they just don't drop the language
There you
altogether and
go.
just speak English. A lot simpler.
Yeah,
But that's me. I'm prejudiced.
yeah. And side note, the reason why I'm good at English is not because of the education. It's because when I went to daycare when I was 2 years old, I went to daycare in English. That's how I picked up the language. But I actually never studied formally in English until I went to college for it.
All right. Well, let's move on from your middle school then or your elementary school to your high school. What was that like?
Yeah, high school, I would say I got a lot more serious. So up until that point, I wasn't taking my studies seriously. I wasn't taking anything seriously. But then at that point, my dad lost his job and things got really bad financially in our home. So I was like, I need to take my life seriously. Because if I don't figure this out, we're going to be in a really tough space. And the other piece that I realized when I was in high school, Tim, is I was maybe 6 or 7 years away from the workplace. So if I just put in the time and I got the job done, I could provide for a family and figure it out how to get out of this tough spot. So I would say high school, I was a lot more serious. So most of my days back then, it's not really exciting to be honest. Besides me playing foosball all day with my friends, besides that, in video games. But besides those two things, I was just working, studying really hard, and that's how I finished high school with a pretty high academic standing. So most of my time was just studying.
Hmm. Now, did you do any arts? Did you do any theatre studies or anything like that? Um,
I did something similar. So I didn't really do arts because in how it works in high school in art education, you have to pick. So you can only do arts or music. So I chose music and I did guitar for 5 years, though I wasn't that great at it to be honest. And the other piece is what else did I do? I did martial arts as well for five
oh, bet
years.
the
I'm
old
I'm a
Jap slap, eh?
yeah, I'm a brown belt in Kempo.
All right. And is that a particular discipline in the Jap slap sort of
You got it.
ring? It's like
It's
kung
like a
fu or
style.
something.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's like a style of karate.
Yeah. So is it contact or is it just movement?
You got it. It was contact, but it wasn't like hardcore. Like we weren't killing each other in the dojo, or else I wouldn't have survived long. To be honest, I mean, you can look at me. I'm not the strongest guy out there. Like I would have been finished. So the focus was a lot more like on endurance and technique. So we would spar, but it wasn't. It was
Hmm.
never intense. So it was more with
Yeah.
like rubber gloves and it's like touch, but it's never like you're trying to rip the other guy's head off. So it wasn't that crazy. Or else I would have ran away a long time ago.
So did you keep it up after school?
Did I what after school?
Did you keep it up? The Jap slap?
Oh, keep it up. Sorry, I heard creep. I didn't understand. Oh yeah, keep it up. Yeah, so what happened is I actually never really liked it, Tim. I just did it to stay consistent. So I
Mm.
actually did keep it up for maybe 5 years, but then when I got to college, I actually stopped doing karate. So I did it for 5 years, probably from around 12, 13-ish to 17,
Mm.
18.
All right. And what about your guitar?
Guitar
Did
too, yeah,
you?
I gave up on it.
Oh, you didn't have any great visions of becoming a, a Hank Marvin or a what's his name out of Queen?
I don't even know.
No.
I was like, I'm like the most boring, pragmatic, risk averse kid you've probably had on your show. You're like, this guy is so boring. He's not trying to be an astronaut or anything. And I think the reason I mature I'm not gonna say it's maturity because we should always dream and the stuff I do today has nothing to do with what I studied. So I guess I
Mm.
figured it out later in life. But I think what I would say to him is I think the reason I matured up so quickly was because my environment forced me to.
Mm.
Literally I became the head of the house like when I was like 15. So I just was like, okay. So I never thought of myself like a Jimi Hendrix. Oh, I'm gonna play guitar and make money. As if, come on, get real, get a life, right? It's like no, it's go be an accountant. That's the guaranteed path. And I was the first person in my family ever in the history of my family to get an education, like to get a university degree.
Mm.
So my parents had a lot of aspirations for me. It's like no, get a safe job, and that's also what I wanted for myself because
Yeah.
I didn't want to struggle as much as they did. So yeah, it wasn't that big of a dreamer. I only started doing that. The story gets interesting later, I promised him.
Well, let's move on a little bit. So you graduated high school with a fairly good all round education. And did you go straight off to university or straight off to college?
You got it. So right after high school, how it works in Quebec is you got 2 years of college called Cégep, which doesn't make any sense to anybody listening to this podcast. And then after Cégep, you go straight to university after that, and that's where the story really begins.
Well, let's get into that story then. Let's talk about your university days. It was, I
Sure.
guess, now I'm just going to make a rough guess here. I guess it wasn't partying and drinking all night long
It
and
wasn't. I
skipping
would go to a lot
lessons.
of. Don't get me wrong. I would go to a lot of parties though. I just wouldn't never drink. I've actually never been drunk once in my life. I know that sounds
Oh,
crazy. Yeah, never
maybe you
once.
already experienced it once.
Maybe it's
Wake up with a hangover in the morning just to see what it feels like.
yeah, maybe towards the end of my life I might. But yeah, I'm pretty clean. So yeah, so when I got to university, Tim, I had the aspiration to be an accountant. So I got an accounting degree. I graduated in accounting too, by the way. And
Mm.
then I realized that I wanted to obviously get a job at the end of this thing. So what people told me was you got to go to these cocktails. So I put a suit on that I paid like $100 for. It was like my prom suit. It's like oversized and a big tie. And I would go to these events to meet people older than me to give me advice. And they all said to do case competitions. And I was like, what's that? What's a case comp? And that's what I learned later that it was like presentations professionally that you do to get a job. So that's how I started doing case competitions, and that was most of my university. Most of my university was hanging out with the other 75 people in that program, helping them how to speak, me learning speaking as well so I could win these things and get a job and after I graduated, and that was probably 90% of my life for the next 3 years after that.
All right. So you spend a lot of time learning how to present, how to talk to people. Me, I've never had a lesson in it in my life. I just I was, I spent my time in the home shouting at people. Actually, I didn't shout that often. So if I ended up having to shout at somebody, then I wasn't doing my job right.
That's funny.
So you got through college by going in an ill-fitted suit, going around talking to people at parties to find out how to progress. So you obviously graduated. What was your? How well did you graduate?
I did not graduate as well as I did in high school. So what had happened was, to rewind the clock a little bit, when these students told me about case competitions, I saw that as my way out of poverty, right, Tim? So
Mm.
I didn't really want to present so I could be a great speaker. I actually didn't care about that at all. I became a great speaker by accident, right? And how to communicate by accident. It was more out of necessity. And I'm really competitive. So I wanted to win these things. If I'm going to do them, I might as well win. So I
Well, yeah.
started doing these competitions, right? Go to the parties, have all the fun. But then what happened was I did it to get that job. But then when I got that job, which was after university, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers for a few years, and then I started my career at IBM. I
Mm.
realized, I was starting to make money, but I wasn't super happy. Like
Mm.
I wasn't fulfilled. Like that was the dream, right? Since I was 12. Like,
Yeah.
how do I get that? Go ahead.
I mean, let's face it, money doesn't bring you happiness. Do you look at the richest people in the world? Most of them are miserable buggers. Um, you need enough money to get by with, and you can get by and have a great life. Um, you see people that have got millions in the bank and they're working 24/7, 365, and they're not happy. You see somebody that's just making ends meet, and they're happy as Larry. Take me.
I mean,
Just
judging by
about
your suits,
scraping
I think
by.
no, I was going to say, judging by your suits, you look like you do better than average. I'll put it that way.
Oh, the Queen gave me those.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's all my old uniforms.
I love that.
So come on in. Price
I,
Waterhouse, what were you doing there?
Absolutely. So back then, Price Waterhouse, I was mostly doing accounting. So to your point, I got the job I wanted, and then I started doing the job, and I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't be doing this with my life.
Did you use a calculator?
No, technology has advanced a lot since those days, Tim. So I wouldn't use a calculator much. It was mostly Excel spreadsheets. That's what we worked in mostly.
Hmm. So, how long did you do that for before you got really, really bored and started looking for something else?
I did it for a year, so I didn't last very long. So essentially, what happened
Boredom
was
threshold
I
there.
yeah, you got it. So I did the competitions, and then I realized a lot of my friends were getting jobs in consulting, and I said, "Oh, what's consulting?" And then I realized that it's kind of like what I was doing in university, but as a full time job. So I said, "Wow, like I want to do that." So I applied for companies like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, IBM, and I got a job at IBM in their consulting division, and that's how I started my career. And then I started MasterTalk probably 30 days after that.
Started.
MasterTalk, what I do today.
Oh, MasterTalk. Is that like your own business then?
You got it. So what happened, Tim, was when I was in my last semester of college slash university, I had trained 60 to 70 people how to speak, but it wasn't for money or anything. I was just helping them to win those case competitions, right? There wasn't a
Hmm.
coach. So I just helped them. But my goal is to work at IBM, which I did for 2.5 years before I quit to do what I do now full time, which is, I'm a public speaking coach and I make YouTube videos on it. But in my last semester of college, somebody came up to me and said, "How did you learn how to speak?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" So, well, did you hire a coach? Did you do
I just opened my
Toastmasters?
mouth and it happens.
Yeah, it's like, just happens. And then he just looked at me really funny. And he's like, "You didn't watch any YouTube videos or something?" I said, "YouTube videos on communication? Who would watch that?" So I started watching them just to see what was out there. And Tim, let me tell you, I did not like what I saw. It's like all these videos were really bad. So that's what jump started the YouTube channel, and it turned into what it is today.
Uh-huh. So how long you been doing it now?
I've been coaching for 7, but I started the YouTube channel 3.5 years ago, almost 4 now.
How many subscribers do you get? What's your
Uh,
count? Do, do,
20.
do you look at your count? Do you just
I do, but it's not it's just a number, right? Like
mm-hmm.
28,000 probably.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in competition with you.
You win the competition, Tim. I got nothing
Yeah,
against you.
I don't think so somehow. Not on YouTube, anyway.
Yeah, it was a grind. It was really a grind. Side hustling it while I was
Mm.
working at IBM because IBM was not easy. I was doing like what 60-hour weeks, and then outside of that, I was making the YouTube videos on the weekends, and I was helping people on the weekends, and I did that for years until I was able to go full time on this.
Yeah. So, what's the process that you use to get people to be comfortable speaking?
For sure. So the way that I think about it, Tim, is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. Right? So one of those balls could be body language, one of them is storytelling, one of them is eye contact, and the list goes on. So it can get really confusing for people. So for me, the question has always been, what are the three easiest balls to juggle? Because if you can juggle those, you can build momentum. So for me, the
Mm.
first one is called the random word exercise. Pick a random word like trophy, like paper towel, like tissue box, and create random presentations out of thin air. And the reason this is effective is two reasons. One, helps you think on your feet. And two, if you could make sense out of nonsense, you could probably make sense out of anything.
Bit like what I do all the time then.
There you go.
Generally, it's just nonsense. I could talk rubbish all day long.
You're an experienced rubbish speaker, like good at speaking rubbish.
Well, maybe one day somebody might pay me for it.
There you go. You
You
never
never
know.
know. You never know. Actually, maybe I could look at. Yes, I was a professional speaker. Well, the Queen paid me to do it anyway, standing up in front of a room full of blokes and giving a lecture. So,
That's awesome. What was it
quite
on?
um, military topics generally. I used
Mm.
to talk to them about mental health issues. I used to talk about sexual health. Um, we used to, I mean, there was a myriad of subjects that we used to talk about from a welfare point of view. And
Mm.
so I was a welfare officer, and prior to that, we were teaching psychological operations. I spent 10 years in psychological operations, where we delivered training for people that were going out on operations, um, how to conduct a psychological campaign. So,
Mm.
and I spent a lot of time on operations, going around teaching um, interpreters how to be radio presenters and guys how to be radio producers. So they could run a radio station effectively to put out messages and stuff like that. So yeah, so a little bit of experience.
Very cool. Very cool. Why used to? You don't want to present in front of the Queen anymore? That's cool.
Well, she died the other month. The other month.
Oh, it's true. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
You're right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I have retired. I retired 4.5 years ago. So from being a regular soldier, and now look at me. I'm a host on a podcast.
Now you're a big podcast host. I love it.
Well, I'm doing all right at it at the moment. I'm enjoying myself, and I just love getting people's stories.
That's awesome, man. Love that.
So, what's the second one then? The
Absolutely.
ability to
So the
talk
sec
rubbish is the first one.
Sure. That's the first one. Second one is called the question drill. So we get asked questions all the time in our life, right? At school, on a podcast, at work. But most of us, Tim, are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. So I'll give you an example with me. A few years ago when I started guesting on podcasts, I was terrible. So bad at this. I remember some guy asked me, he was like, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know, man. Los Angeles? London? New York? It's like, I don't know. You tell me. So instead, I became more proactive because obviously that wasn't the right answer. So every day for 5 minutes, I would just answer one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise. And I did that every single day. But if you do that for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise, Tim.
Wow. Can I ask myself questions? Yeah, I could probably ask myself questions. And there'll probably be a daft question with a daft answer.
Or if it helps, you can get your audience to give you those questions. Like you can have them supply them in advance, so then you just have to answer them every day. So that's another way to do it as well.
Yeah. So ask me a question.
Ask you a question. So I already asked you one, so let me give you another one. What's your vision for your retirement?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that question. Just carry on doing what I'm doing, actually, and just grow my channel and to leave a legacy for future generations. That's why I do it. That's what drives me every day to get up and do a podcast and interview somebody to leave their story as a legacy for future generations. And if I can do that, I should be happy.
So let me ask you another.
And I've also got a live stream and the live stream's all about taboos and destigmatising mental health, suicide, and making uncomfortable topics comfortable to talk about in everyday conversation.
I love that, Tim. And then my other question for you is, what did you get right about retirement? What did you get wrong? So what was in line with what your expectations were of retirement, and what do you feel like you thought that was retirement but it wasn't?
I'd like to say I got my finances right. They were okay until we sort of we're struggling. We're on the borderline. And we're comfortable. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I plan for the retirement, and yeah, it's with the cost of living crisis, it's just a bit of a struggle. But other than that, I think I've got it right. I certainly adjusted what I did when I first retired, and now I'm doing exactly what I want when I want. So from that point of view, I've got it right.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
No problem at all. What's the third one then?
The third one is make a list of the people that you love the most in your life and send them each a 20-second video message just telling them how much you appreciate having them in your life. That's it. The video message teaches us a really valuable lesson about what communication is for, Tim. A lot of people think communication is about, oh yeah, this is a chore, I don't want to do it. But what video messages teaches us is that it helps us make people's days better, even if we're terrible communicators, even if it comes out wrong, even if there's mistakes in the video. They don't care. Because trust me, Tim, if we got a video message from an 8-year-old niece of ours who goes, oh my God, it's so great to see you, Uncle Brenden, it doesn't matter what the video sounds like. You're going to jump up and down and say, this made my week. And that's really the goal.
I'll start doing that. So do a quick short for somebody.
That's it.
Brilliant. So how can people get in touch with you? How can people get you to train them up to be better speakers, communicators?
Absolutely, Tim. It's so great to be on your show. Thanks for having me. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one
Don't keep doing that. That's rude.
This is rude?
Yeah.
This is rude?
That's not rude.
This is rude?
That's rude. Yeah.
Why is that? In the UK?
Yeah.
What does this
like
mean?
doing that.
Really?
Yeah. But we don't mind.
That's interesting. Okay, I learned something new. Anyways,
yeah,
2 ways
I learned
to
something
keep
new as well.
Interesting. So the first way to keep in touch is the YouTube channel. Just go to MasterTalk and you'll have access to all the videos on speaking. I have like 200 there that are available for free. And the second way is to attend my Zoom workshop that I do on communication. That's also free. It's live and interactive, and all you have to do to register for the next one is go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Excellent. So we'll put all that in the description, and yeah. So from from a non-communicator to a communicator.
There you go.
Terrific. So Brenden, that's been fascinating.
I hope it was. I wasn't sure.
I've enjoyed our little chat.
Okay, good. That's good. Likewise, it was super fun.
Thanks very much. Well, that's Brenden. What a great chat.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.